Hello, my wonderful third graders. This is our last lesson in Domain 9 European Exploration of North America. And Lesson 9 is called Samuel de Champlain. Some vocabulary you will hear in the read aloud. Imagined what something would look like or be like. Honorary. It's an adjective, it describes something relating to a position or title awarded to a person who is honored or greatly respected as a sign of achievement or rank. An example, in 2011, the poet Maya Angelou received an honorary degree from the University of Redlands in California. Landfall, the very first land a person sees or reaches after a flight or a voyage by sea. After a long voyage across the ocean, the immigrants cheered for joy when they made landfall at Ellis Island. Navigator, a person who decides which direction to go or which route to take, especially on a ship or in an airplane. Pelts are hides or skin of animals, including the fur. Your reputation is the public opinion by which someone or something is perceived. Our school bus driver has the reputation of giving very accurate weather predictions. Status is the position of someone compared to others in that group. As co-captain of the volleyball team, Wanda's status was equal to the status of the other co-captain. Okay, so you can see all the different routes that we have learned about. We've learned about Columbus. We've learned about Ponce de Leon, De Soto, Coronado, Cabot, Hudson, and today we're going to learn about Champlain. So you can see from this map using the key that Champlain is the black dotted line here. So you can see some of the areas that Champlain went to and where he came from. The French explorer Samuel de Champlain made his first voyages to North America around the time Henry Hudson was trying to find the Northwest Passage. Champlain earned a reputation for being a talented navigator by leading a 2-year expedition to the West Indies and Central America. The son of a sea captain, he was not born into high social status in France, but his accomplishments as a navigator and talented map maker earned him an honorary title of Royal Geographer from King Henry IV in his court. Here you can see like an older map and his route. In 1603, Champlain was invited to sail in a French fur trading expedition to an area known at the time as New France in present-day Canada. Decades before Champlain's expeditions, in 1534, a French navigator and explorer, Jacques Cartier, claimed the shores of the St. Lawrence River, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and the areas now known as Newfoundland in Nova Scotia, in honor of France. Cartier's attempts to colonize an area around present-day Quebec failed at the time, but these explorations were only the beginning of a fur trading relationship between France and the natives in the area of New France. What other explorers did you hear about who also explored Newfoundland? John Cabot. The goal of Champlain's 1603 expedition was to trade with the native people in the area of New France and return home with beaver pelts and other furs that could be sold in France. During this voyage, Champlain talked to fur traders and fishermen and met native people of the areas he visited. He made a map of the St. Lawrence River, a long river that flows away from the Great Lakes and empties into the Atlantic Ocean. When he returned home to France, Champlain published a report on his expedition. In 1604, Champlain took part in an attempt to start a French colony in New France with a small group of colonists. They suffered a difficult winter in their original settlement near the mouth of the St. Croix River. during which almost half of the colonists died. After Champlain and a few men scouted the surrounding area, the surviving colonists moved to the area presently known as Nova Scotia. This colonization attempt was not a success, but Champlain took this time to explore and map areas along the Atlantic coast, eventually sailing as far south as Cape Cod. So you've heard three forms of a word related to establishing a permanent settlement: colony, colonize, and colonization. Colonization is the process, colonize is the act of doing it, and a colony is the place. So you can see in this map over here that, or we see in Nova Scotia is up here in Canada, right up here. And then over here you can see Cape Cod in what is Massachusetts now. Cape Cod would be right up here in Massachusetts. After exploring several possible locations along the northeastern Atlantic coast, Champlain decided that the best place for a French colony was along the St. Lawrence River. Champlain envisioned the colony becoming a control center for the fur trade. This was a sign of an important change in the way Europeans thought about North America. John Cabot and Henry Hudson had been trying to find a way to go around America, or a way to go through it. They were not especially interested in America and its resources. They were interested in goods from Asia and the East Indies, such as spices and silk. They thought of America as something that was blocking their way. With Champlain, there was a new way of thinking. Champlain was still interested in finding a Northwest Passage. He went on several expeditions where there was an important goal. But he and many of the men who came after him began to think of North America not just as an obstacle on the path to more profitable places, but as a place that was profitable in its own right, and a place that might be worth settling. In 1608, Champlain received permission to lead an expedition of 3 ships and about 32 colonists from France. He sailed up the river and established a settlement which was named Quebec City. Only 9 of the original colonists, including Champlain, survived the first cold winter in Quebec City, but more settlers arrived the following June. At first, Quebec City was little more than a fort, but Champlain had a dream. He hoped that Quebec City would be the capital of a large and prosperous French colony. He spent the rest of his life working to make that dream a reality. Champlain set up a fur trading station in Quebec City. Native Americans could bring animal furs to the city, and French traders would buy the furs and ship them back to France. In order to make sure that the settlers at Quebec City would not be attacked by the local native people, Champlain made an alliance with some of the tribes who lived along the St. Lawrence, including the Huron and the Algonquin people. He supported these tribes in a war against the Iroquois, a large confederacy of tribes who lived to the south in what is now New York City, or New York State. Champlain led expeditions against the Iroquois. During the first of these expeditions in 1609, he became the first European to visit the lake that is now named for him, Lake Champlain. In 1615, he became the first known European to arrive at the Great Lakes. There was more than just a military alliance between Champlain and the tribes, however. They learned things from each other as well. Even the name of this new city, Quebec, was borrowed from the Algonquin language spoken by many Native Americans throughout North America. The word Quebec comes from the Algonquin word Quebec, meaning where the river narrows. Champlain made several trips to France to recruit new settlers and secure French government support of his colony. He eventually married and brought his new wife to settle with him in Quebec City. He also brought missionaries to New France to teach the native people about Christianity. The missionaries worked with the fur traders and the settlers to extend French settlements farther inland. In the end, Champlain was successful. The colony of Quebec did not just survive, it prospered. It became the first permanent French settlement on the continent of North America. The areas that made up New France remained part of the French Empire for more than 100 years and in time became part of a large country now known as Canada. So you can see this is a missionary in this picture. What is a missionary? Someone who goes somewhere, often to a foreign place, to do religious work. Several days ago, you learned of another European country that sent missionaries to North America. What was that country? Spain. Over the last couple of weeks, you've learned about many European explorers and their expeditions. You have learned that they were all so intrigued by stories of wealth, spices, and gold that they decided to explore unfamiliar lands and seas. These explorers embarked on investigative travels to find answers to their questions. Now it's our turn to ask a question. Who was the first known European to discover America? As you have heard, Christopher Columbus is the European often credited with discovering the Americas. While searching for a route to the East Indies, he accidentally bumped into islands in the Caribbean, now known as the West Indies. However, Viking explorer Leif Erikson, another European, had also traveled to the Americas. Erikson landed in Vinland, which is in present-day Canada, is now called Newfoundland. The Vikings came first. Historians believe that the Vikings landed in North America about 500 years before Christopher Columbus and John Cabot. John Cabot landed in the same area as the Vikings. Though Newfoundland was not continuously inhabited, it had certainly been by the time Columbus landed in the Caribbean. All of the European explorers we've learned about, Columbus, Ponce de Leon, De Soto, Coronado, Cabot, Hudson, and Champlain, landed in many different parts of the Americas, claiming their discoveries in honor of their countries. But it's important to remember that when these explorers made landfall, they learned there were already people living in North America. Who were these people? The Native Americans. What do you remember about the Native Americans? These people had already been in the Americas for many, many years. Though archaeologists debate exactly when and how they arrived here, most agree that they came from Asia between 15,000 and 50,000 years ago. There is strong evidence that suggests there were about 20 million native people in North America when European explorers first arrived. That means that for every one of Columbus's men who scouted out North America, there were 10,000 Native Americans already living here. That's a lot of people. Wow. The native peoples lived according to their own customs and cultures, planted corn and squash, built great civilizations in the Americas. Europeans exploring and later settling in the Americas brought with them their own cultures and curiosity as well as diseases. The Europeans brought great changes to the natives' way of life. Although we cannot know for sure who were the first people living in the Americas and when or how they arrived, what we can say for certain is that the history, culture, and legacy of both the Native Americans and the European explorers are still evident today. That means there's still traces of them, right? There's still Native Americans, and there are lots of people that can trace their ancestry back to Europeans that came over during the time of the European explorers. Do you remember which of the Native American groups was the most densely populated when the Europeans first arrived? The Southwest. Do you remember why? It is thought that the climate tended itself to better crops. What honorary title did King Henry IV of France give to Champlain? Royal Geographer. So, a geographer is a person that maps out geography, parts of the earth. Because of this reputation as a talented navigator and map maker, what was Champlain invited to do? Sail to New France, which today is Canada, on a fur trading expedition to get pelts to sell in France. What bodies of water did Champlain explore and map when he made landfall in North America on his search for a Northwest Passage? The river now known as the St. Lawrence River in the Great Lakes. Now there's a lake named after him, right? Lake Champlain. How would you compare and contrast Champlain's expeditions with those of Cabot and Hudson? Like Cabot and Hudson, Champlain was still searching for a Northwest Passage as a faster and cheaper way to reach Asia, but unlike Cabot and Hudson, Champlain did not see North America as an obstacle to get around on the way to Asia. He envisioned it as a good place to colonize. What were some of the contributions Champlain made to the exploration of North America? He made a map of the St. Lawrence River, tried to start a French colony, mapped much of the coast of northeastern North America as far south as Cape Cod, established a settlement at Quebec City, which became the first permanent French settlement in North America, established a fur trading station at Quebec City, formed alliances with local Native American tribes, was the first European to visit the lake that is now known as Lake Champlain, and brought French missionaries to North America. How would you describe the relationship between Champlain and the Native Americans he met in New France? He formed alliances with some tribes such as the Huron and the Algonquin tribes, and worked with them against some competing tribes such as the Iroquois Confederacy. How did this relationship compare to some of the former interactions of Europeans and Native Americans? How was it different than some of the conquistadors and other explorers treated Native Americans? Champlain formed alliances with the Native Americans, and these alliances were more than military alliances. The French and the Native Americans traded with each other and learned from one another. The name of the new city, Quebec, was borrowed from the Algonquin people's language. The settlement of Quebec prospered with Native American cooperation. In contrast, the other groups used the Native Americans as slaves, forced them to work with them, made alliances, but not really to trade with them, more to try and save themselves and make sure that nobody hurt themselves. They did a lot of killing. I like Champlain. He reminds me a little bit of Hudson. They seem to be the kindest of our explorers. Do you know, what does this image card show? This is actually the 13 colonies. Okay? The 13 colonies come together to form the United States of America. And did it happen before or after the European exploration of North America? It happened after, right? The Europeans had to discover North America before they decided to start sending a bunch of people over to colonize it. And we're going to learn about the 13 colonies in our next domain. Our word for the day is envisioned. In the read aloud you heard, Champlain envisioned this country becoming a control center for the fur trade. Say the word envisioned with me. When you have envisioned something, you have imagined how something could look or be. Tony envisioned getting a puppy for her birthday. Have you ever envisioned what something would look like or feel like while you were waiting for it to happen? What are some of the achievements or profits the explorers envisioned gaining from their travels? What were the explorers after? Alright, don't forget to fill out your expedition log for Samuel Champlain. Why did Samuel de Champlain sail? Well, the French asked him to. He wanted to create a colony in Canada. He wanted to help set up a fur trade with the Native Americans. For which country did Samuel de Champlain sail? He sailed for France. That's the country that sent him. What areas did he explore? He explored present-day Canada, Quebec. He went all the way down to the Great Lakes, Newfoundland area. Describe the land the people encountered and the resources found. He actually he worked with the Native Americans, right, to trade. They created a trade system with the Native Americans for fur. Okay. The land, where did he start his settlement? He started his settlement at the mouth of the river, the St. Lawrence River. And what resources did they find? They found furs. That's one thing. The Native Americans taught them some other ways to use resources. All right, third graders, I know that this has been a long unit, and I know that it's been a lot of information, but I hope you learned quite a bit and enjoyed learning a little bit about European explorers.